Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Śrīla Bhaktivedanta Nārada Goswami Maharaj Śrila Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Bhaira Shata Śrīmad Śrila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Bhaira Shata Śrīmad Śrila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Śrila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Bhaira Shata Śrīmad Śrila Bhakti Vigyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Bhaira Shata Śrīmad Śrila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Mahabhagavat Śrila Bhakshwaras Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Śrila Satchidananda Bhakti Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Śrila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Bhattadash Raghunath Shar Gosai Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai. Nama Acharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaura Mandal Vraja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kunda Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad Bhakti Vedanta Nārayaniti Namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo mahavadanyaya Krishna prema pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam Tvaipayano virahakatara ajuhava Putreti tanmayataya taravo bhinedu Stang sarvabhuta hridayam munimanatosmi. Narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam Devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Shrinvatang swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana Hridantasto hyabhadrani vedhunoti suritsatam. Nashta prayeshvabhadreshu nityang bhagavat sevaya Bhagavatutama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. Tavaivasmi na jivami tvaya vina iti vigyaya radhe tvam nayamang charanantikam. Bhaktya vihina aparadha lakshay shibdashtakama ditaranga madhye kripa mai tvam sharanam prapanna vrinde namaste charanaravindam. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dandavat pranams, Raseshwari Mataji. Isn't the Badger Festival on? Are you in Badger right now, Raseshwari Mataji? Just the other day, my parents sent me a video call. My father jumped into the kirtan and was showing me everybody there and what's going on. Yeah, I heard it's a really lovely festival. Topic of Gurudev's books, Gurudev's contribution through his books, right? Dandavat pranams Manjari Didi, Dandavat pranams Madhavi Didi, Indira Mataji, Gargarajji, Prajumna Prabhu, Dandavat pranams. And Mantramurti Mataji, Dandavat pranams. Okay, so let's see. Oops. What am I doing? Oh yeah. So Narad Muni, he concluded his allegorical story of Puranjan. Prācīnabarhi, however, couldn't fully grasp its purport. Nārada then explains that Puranjan was none other than the jiva, transmigrating from one body to another body, to another, city. The body was compared to the city with 9 gates, right? He said, the jiva attains different types of bodies under the influence of the 3 modes. All his attempts to counteract the threefold miseries remain futile. One can get out of this entanglement only by performing bhakti under the guidance of a guru and thus awakening to one's original Krishna consciousness. Bhakti takes place by hearing about Krishna. The mind is the storehouse of all materialistic desires and carries the soul from one body to another. A devotee can avoid this transmigration by bhakti. Therefore, worship the Supreme Lord Krishna. So this is what we're reading now. And let's go, what did we read yesterday? Let's just go over that really quick. Just looking at the Śrīmad. We read 34 to 48. Okay. Nārada gives bhakti as a solution. What was it? 34. Yeah. Okay. Nārada's solution for the soul's predicament. What was the soul's predicament? All the attempts of the jiva to counteract the threefold miseries remain futile. Such attempts to escape miseries are like shifting a burden from his head to his shoulder. So what's the solution for this predicament? Nārada explains. One cannot counteract a troublesome dream by another hallucination, but only by waking up. Similarly, I always have a hard time saying that word. Similarly, material existence which is due to our ignorance cannot be counteracted by karma, but only by awakening to Krishna consciousness. So how can one stop this cycle of birth and death, this material existence, samsara? The only remedy is to surrender to Krishna. One's real interest, artha bhutasya, is to get out of nescience. The remedy is bhakti unto the Lord through his representative. Bhakti unto the Lord through his representative. Bhaktya paramaya guru. Without this, one can develop neither detachment nor knowledge. So without bhakti unto the Lord through Shri Guru, the Lord's representative, one can develop neither detachment nor real knowledge. One who faithfully hears and studies the Lord's glories and is always engaged in the culture of Krishna consciousness very soon becomes eligible to see the Lord. Then the question arises, where will bhakti take place? And answer, Krishna Katha. Krishna Katha is found where broad-minded, pure devotees live. And Krishna Katha, and who hear and chant, where pure devotees live, who hear and chant the glories of the Supreme Lord with great eagerness. So Raseshwari Mataji is very fortunate to be up in Badger, where there's lots of broad-minded devotees who hear and chant the glories of the Supreme Lord with great eagerness. Well, let me see, actually. Is she there? Oh, you're not in Badger. Sorry. She said, I'd love to be there, but I think it's a little too much for me. Yeah. Yeah, Badger is a place to... Bhumi Devi. My parents are kind of like that also. They like to just be a bit more reclusive. Okay, so disturbances. The conditioned soul is always disturbed by bodily necessities and has very little time to cultivate attachment for hearing the Katamrita, the nectarian Katha of the Lord. Note, without the association of devotees, one cannot cultivate Krishna consciousness. Nirjan Bhajan. Cultivating Krishna consciousness in a solitary place is not possible for a neophyte devotee, for he will be disturbed by the bodily necessities such as eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Nārada ends Prācīnabarhi's performance of rituals. Brahma, Shiva, the Kumaras, many others, and even myself, Nārada, are knowledgeable in the Vedas, skillful at speaking them, powerful by austerities, education, and meditation, and powerful by austerities, education, and meditation. But even we do not know or see the Lord perfectly after inquiring about him. Even they are not able to know the Lord. Note, Jnanis do not know the Lord. This is expressed by Kaimutya Nyaya. If we do not know the Lord, then what to speak of others? If even, those who have bhakti to the Lord can't fully know him, then what to speak of those who don't even have bhakti but just have jnana? Karmis do not know the Lord. Despite cultivating Vedic knowledge and worshipping the demigods, they cannot understand the Lord. A devotee knows the Lord by engaging in devotional service. When the Lord to him, he gives up all material activities and the activities of karma kanda. Vedic rituals are never the goal of life, although they may appear to be legitimate goals and pleasing to the ear. Link. Then why do my priests and the sages, learned men, make me do karma? Engage in these fruitive activities. They accept Vedic ritualistic ceremonies as all in all, not knowing that the purpose of the Vedas is to understand one's own home, Swalokam, where the Lord lives. Note, Dhumra Diya indicates that they know Swarga, but not Vaikuntha. Link. Then what is the supreme activity? Please tell me. And this is where we read up to. So, because of your foolishness, you proudly sacrifice many animals without knowing the supreme activity, which is to please the Supreme Personality of God, the Supreme Lord. And when that's the nature of the Lord, the result of worshiping the Lord, the allegory of the deer, this is what we're going to be reading today. Okay, let's open this up. Okay. Astirya Darbai Pragagrai Kartsnena Kshiti Mandalam Stabdo Brihad Vadanmani Karmana Vaishiyat Param tat karma haritosham yat savidya tanmatiryaya. One second. Okay. My dear king, the entire world is covered with the sharp points of kusha grass, and on the strength of this, you have become proud because you have killed various types of animals and sacrifices. Because of your foolishness, you do not know that devotional service is the only way one can please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You cannot understand this fact. Your only activities should be those that can please the Personality of Godhead. Our education should be such that we can become elevated to Krishna consciousness. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, the great sage Nārada Muni directly insults the king because he was engaged in performing sacrifices that entail the killing of a great number of animals. The king was thinking that he was great for having performed so many sacrifices, but the great sage Nārada directly chastises him, informing him that his animal killing only leads to his being puffed up with false prestige. Actually, anything that is done which does not lead to Krishna consciousness is a sinful activity, and any education that does not lead one to understand Krishna is false education. If Krishna consciousness is missing, one is simply engaged in false activities and false educational pursuits. Harir deha britam atma swayam prakritirishvara tatpada mulam sharanam yatakshemo nrinam iha. Sri Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the Supersoul and guide of all living entities who have accepted material bodies within this world. He is the supreme controller of all material activities and material nature. He is also our best friend, and everyone should take shelter at his lotus feet. In doing so, one's life will be auspicious. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 1861, it is said, Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridesherjuna tishtati. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna. The living entity is within the body, and the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is also there. He is called the Antaryami and Chaitaguru. As Lord Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, he is controlling everything. Sarvasva chaham hriti sannivishto mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Everything is being directed by the Supersoul within the body. Therefore, the better part of valor is to take his direction and be happy. To take his directions, one needs to be a devotee, and this is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 10:10. Tesham satatayuktanam bhajatang pritipurvakam tadami buddhiyogam tang yena mam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Although the Supersoul is in everyone's heart, Ishvara sarvabhutanam hridesherjuna tishtati, he talks only to the pure devotees who constantly engage in his service. In Chaitanya-Bhagavat, Antya 3:45, it is said, Tahare se boli vidya mantra adhyayan Krishna pada parme jay koroye sthira man. One who has fixed his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna is to be understood as having the best education and as having studied all the Vedas. There are also other appropriate quotes in Chaitanya Bhagavat. She vidyarfal jani ho nishchoy Krishna pada parme jadi chitta vritti rai. The perfect result of an education is the fixing of one's mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. That's from Adi 13:178. Digvijay koribo vidyar karya nahe ishvare bajile she vidya satta kohe. Conquering the world by means of material education is not desirable.
If one engages himself in devotional service, his education is perfected. Pore keno lok Krishna bhakti jani bare, se jadi nahilo tabe vidyaya ki kore. The purpose of education is to understand Krishna and his devotional service. If one does not do so, then education is false. And literally it says, tabe, then, vidyaya ki kore. Then what will knowledge do for us? What will happen by such knowledge? Tahare se boli dharma karma sadachar, Ishvare se priti janme sammata sabar. Being cultured, educated, very active, and religious means developing natural love for Krishna. Antya 3:44. Everyone has dormant love for Krishna, and by culture and education, that has to be awakened. That is the purpose of this Krishna consciousness movement. Once Lord Chaitanya asked Sri Rai Ramananda what the best part of education was, and Ramananda Rai replied that the best part of education is advancement in Krishna consciousness. Savai priyatamaschatma yato na bhayamanvapi iti veda savai vidvan yo vidvam sa gurur hari. One who is engaged in devotional service has not the least fear in material existence. This is because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supersoul and friend of everyone. One who knows this secret is actually educated, and one thus educated can become the spiritual master of the world. One who is an actually bona fide spiritual master, representative of Krishna, is not different from Krishna. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Shaksha dharitvena samasta shastra uktas tata bhavyata eva sadhi. The spiritual master is described in every scripture as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual master is accepted as identical with the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he is the most confidential servant of the Lord. Kintu prabhurya kriya eva tasya. The purport is that both the supersoul and the individual soul are dear to everyone. Everyone loves himself, and when he becomes more advanced, he loves the supersoul also. A person who is self-realized does not recommend the worship of anyone but the supersoul. He knows that to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead is easier than to worship various demigods under the influence of lust and the desire for material enjoyment. The devotee is therefore always engaged in a loving devotional service of the Lord. Such a person is a true guru. In the Padma Puran it is said, Satkarmo nipuno vipro mantra tantra visharada avaishnava gurur nasyad vaishnava swapacho guru. We learned this in Gurukul, that shloka. Even if a Brahmin is very learned in Vedic scriptures and knows the 6 occupational duties of a Brahmin, he cannot become a guru or a spiritual master unless he is a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, if one is born in a family of dog-eaters but is a pure devotee of the Lord, he can become a spiritual master. The conclusion is that one cannot become a spiritual master unless he is a pure devotee of the Lord. One who is a spiritual master in accordance with the above descriptions of devotional service is to be understood as the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally present. According to the words mentioned here, Gurur Hari, consulting a bona fide spiritual master means consulting the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally. One should therefore take shelter of such a bona fide spiritual master. Success in life means accepting a spiritual master who knows Krishna as the only Supreme Beloved Personality. One should worship such a confidential devotee of the Lord. Naraduvacha Prashna evam hishanchino. I thought Narada was already speaking. I'm so confused. Anyhow. Prashna evam hisanchino bhavata purusharshava atrame vadato guhyam nishamaya sunishchitam. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of random that I put Narada Vacha there. The great Saint Nārada continued. Well, I don't mean to say they. Vyasadeva. Anyways, oh great personality, I have replied properly about all that you have asked me. Now hear another narration that is accepted by saintly persons and is very confidential. Purport. Sri Narada Muni is personally acting as a spiritual master of King Barhishman, or Prācīnabarhi. It was Narada Muni's intention that through his instructions, the king would immediately give up all engagement and fruitive activity and take to devotional service. However, although the king understood everything, he was still not prepared to give up his engagements. As the following verses will show, the king was contemplating sending for his sons, who were away from home executing austerities and penances. After their return, he would entrust his kingdom to them and then leave home. This is the position of most people. They accept a bona fide spiritual master and listen to him, but when the spiritual master indicates that they should leave home and fully engage in devotional service, they hesitate. The duty of the spiritual master is to instruct the disciple as long as he does not come to the understanding that this materialistic way of life, fruitive activity, is not at all beneficial. Actually, one should take to devotional service from the beginning of life as Prahlad Maharaj advised, Komara acharit pragyo dharman bhagavatan iha. That means Komar, from the Komar age, which is like 5 years old, one should take to devotional service. According to all the instructions of the Vedas, we can understand that unless one takes to Krishna consciousness and devotional service, he is simply wasting his time engaging in the fruitive activities of material existence. Narada Muni therefore decided to relate another allegory to the king so that he might be induced to give up family life within material existence. Shudram charam sumanasam sharane mititva raktam sharangri ganasam asulubdaka. That deer is very much attached to his business, and he is enjoying the sweet singing of the bumblebees in his garden. Just try to understand his position. He is unaware that before him is a tiger, which is accustomed to living at the cost of another's flesh. Behind the deer is a hunter, who is threatening to pierce him with sharp arrows. Thus the deer's death is imminent. 1 second, I just need to plug in my computer. Okay. Purport. Let me plug in my mic. Here's an allegory in which the king finds a deer that is always in a dangerous position. Although threatened from all sides, the deer simply eats grass in a nice flower garden, unaware of the danger all around him. All living entities, especially human beings, think themselves very happy in the midst of families. As if living in a flower garden and hearing the sweet humming of bumblebees, everyone is centered around his wife, who is the beauty of family life. The bumblebees' humming may be compared to the talk of children. The human being, just like a deer, enjoys his family without knowing that before him is the factor of time, which is represented by the tiger. The fruitive activities of a living entity simply create another dangerous position and oblige him to accept different types of bodies. For a deer to run after a mirage of water in the desert is not unusual. The deer is also very fond of sex. The conclusion is that one who lives like a deer will be killed in due course of time. Vedic literatures therefore advise that we should understand our constitutional position and take to devotional service before death comes. According to the Bhagavatam 11.9.29, Labdva sadurlabhamidam bahusambhavante manusyamartadam anityamapi hadira kintu prodyanakila paramananda purmritabder. Sorry, just checking everything's going right. Nishreyasaya vishaya kalu sarvatasyat. After many births, we have attained this human form. Therefore, before death comes, we should engage ourselves in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. That is the fulfillment of human life. What? That's a verse? Oh my God. Okay, let's try this out. That's not a verse, that's just, that looks like prose though. Okay, let's do this. Oh, and I just want to see what verse we're reading up to. Is it 59? Yes, 59. Okay. Sumana sama dharmanam strinam sharana ashrame pushpa madhu kandavat kshudratamam kamya karma vipakajam kama sukha lavam jai vyao pastyadi vichanvantam mithuni bhuya tar abhiniveshita manusham sharangri gana sama gitavad ati manohara vanitadi janalapeshvatitaram ati pralobhita karnam agre vrika yutavad atmana ayur harato ho raktaran tan kala lava visheshan aviganaya griheshu viharantam prishtata eva paroksham anupravrito lubdaka kritantonta sharena yam iha paravidyati tam imam atmanam aho rajan bhina hridayam drashtum arhasiti. Okay. That's kind of fun though. My dear king, a woman who is very attractive in the beginning, but in the end, my dear king, a woman who is very attractive in the beginning, but in the end is very disturbing, is exactly like a flower, which is attractive in the beginning and detestable at the end. With a woman, the living entity is entangled with lusty desires, and he enjoys sex, just as one enjoys the aroma of a flower. He thus enjoys a life of sense gratification, from his tongue to his genitals, and in this way the living entity considers himself very happy in family life. United with his wife, he always remains absorbed in such thoughts. He feels great pleasure in hearing the talks of his wife and children, which are like the sweet humming of bumblebees that collect honey from flower to flower. He forgets that before him is time, which is taking away his lifespan with the passing of day and night. He does not see the gradual diminishing of his life, nor does he care about the superintendent of death, who is trying to kill him from behind, the hunter. Just try to understand this. You are in a precarious position, and you are threatened from all sides. Purport. Oh wait, and we're reading up to 59, so I'm so spaced out. Purport. Materialistic life means forgetting one's constitutional position as the eternal servant of Krishna. And this forgetfulness is especially enhanced in the Grihastha ashram. In the Grihastha ashram, a young man accepts a young wife who is very beautiful in the beginning, But in due course of time, after giving birth to many children and becoming older and older, she demands many things from the husband to maintain the entire family. At such a time, the wife becomes detestable to the very man who accepted her in her younger days. One becomes attached to the Grihastha ashram for two reasons only. Well, I don't know. The wife cooks palatable dishes for the satisfaction of her husband's tongue, and she gives him sexual pleasure at night. A person attached to the Grihastha ashram is always thinking of these two things: palatable food and sex enjoyment. The talks of the wife, which are enjoyed as a family the talks of the wife, which are enjoyed as a family recreation, and the talks of the children, both attract the living entity. He thus forgets that he has to die someday, and he has to prepare for the next life if he wants to be put into a congenial body. The deer in the flower garden is an allegory used by the great sage Nārada to point out to the king that the king himself is similarly entrapped by such surroundings. Actually, everyone is surrounded by such a family life, which misleads one. The living entity thus forgets that he has to return home, back to Godhead. He simply becomes entangled in family life. Prahlad Maharaj has therefore hinted, Hitvatma patam grihamanda kupam vanam gato yad dharamashayeta. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 7.5.5. Family life is considered a blind well, andakupam, into which a person falls and dies without help. Prahlad Maharaj recommends that while one's senses are there and one is strong enough, he should abandon the Grihastha ashram and take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, going to the forests of Vrindavan. According to Vedic civilization, one has to give up family life at a certain age, the age of 50. Take vanaprastha and eventually remain alone as a sannyasi. That is the prescribed method of Vedic civilization known as varnashram dharma. When one takes sannyas after enjoying family life, he pleases the Supreme Lord Vishnu. One has to understand one's position in family or worldly life. That is called intelligence. One should not remain always trapped in family life to satisfy his tongue and genitals in association with a wife. In such a way, one simply spoils his life. According to Vedic civilization, it is imperative to give up the family at a certain age, by force if necessary. Unfortunately, so-called followers of Vedic life do not give up their family, even at the end of life, unless they are forced by death. There should be a thorough overhauling of the social system, and society should revert to the Vedic principles, that is, the 4 varnas and the 4 ashrams. Swatam vichaksham Chitam niyacharidikarna dhunim chitte jahyanganashramam asattamayuttagatam prinihi hangsa sharanam viramakramena. This is a long purport. Super long purport. Well, 3 full pages. My dear king, just try to understand the allegorical position of the deer. Be fully conscious of yourself and give up the pleasure of hearing about promotion to heavenly planets by fruit of activity. Give up household life, which is full of sex, as well as stories about such things, and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the mercy of liberated souls. In this way, please give up your attraction for material existence. In one of his songs, Srila Narottam Das Thakur writes, Karma Kanda Jnana Kanda Kevala Vishera Bhanda Amrita Boliya Jeva Khai Nana Yoni Sada Fire Kadarya Bhakshana Kore Tar Janmayada Pate Jai tar janmayada pate jai. Fruit of activities and mental speculation are simply cups of poison. Whoever drinks of them, thinking them to be nectar, must struggle very hard, life after life, in different types of bodies. Such a person eats all kinds of nonsense and becomes condemned by his activities of so-called sense enjoyment. People are generally enamored you'd say by, right? People are generally enamored by the fruitive results of worldly activity and mental speculation. They generally desire to be promoted to heavenly planets, merge into the existence of Brahman, or keep themselves in the midst of family life, enchanted by the pleasures of the tongue and genitals. The great sage Nārada clearly instructs King Brihishman not to remain his entire life in the Grahastha ashram. Being in the Grahastha ashram means being under the control of one's wife. One has to give up all this and put himself into the ashram of the Paramahamsa, that is, put himself under the control of the spiritual master. The Paramahamsa ashram is the ashram of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, under whom the spiritual master has taken shelter. The symptoms of the bona fide spiritual master are stated in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 11.3.21. Tasmar gurum prapadyeta jigyasu shreya uttamam shabde pare chanishnatam brahmanyupashamashrayam. I love how all the verses that we learned in our Shloka group, Srila Prabhupada keeps on quoting them again and again. Any person who is seriously desirous of achieving real happiness must seek out a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of a spiritual master is that he must have realized the conclusion of the scriptures by deliberation and arguments, and thus be able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken complete shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, are to be understood as bona fide spiritual masters. A Paramahamsa is one who is taking shelter of the Parabrahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one takes shelter of the Paramahamsa spiritual master, gradually, through training and instruction, he will become detached from worldly life and ultimately return home back to Godhead. The particular mention of Anganashramam Asattama Yuttagatam is very interesting. The whole world is in the clutches of Maya, being controlled by a woman. Not only is one controlled by a woman, who is one's wife, but one is also controlled by so many sex literatures. That is the cause of one's being entangled in the material world. One cannot give up this abominable association through one's own effort, but if one takes shelter of a bona fide spiritual master who is a Paramahamsa, he will gradually be elevated to the platform of spiritual life. The pleasing words of the Vedas that inspire one to elevate oneself to the heavenly planets or merge into the existence of the Supreme are for the less intelligent, who are described in Bhagavad Gita as Mayaya Pahrita Jnana, those whose knowledge is taken away by the illusory energy. Real knowledge means understanding the miserable condition of material life. One should take shelter of a bona fide liberated soul, the spiritual master, and gradually elevate himself to the spiritual platform and thus become detached from the material world. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Hamsa Sharanam refers to the cottage in which saintly persons live. Generally, a saintly person lives in a remote place in the forest or in a humble cottage. However, we should note that the times have changed. It may be beneficial for a saintly person's own interest to go to the forest and live in a cottage, but if one becomes a preacher, especially in Western countries, he has to invite many classes of men who are accustomed to living in comfortable apartments. Therefore, in this age, a saintly person has to make proper arrangements to receive people and attract them to the message of Krishna consciousness. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, perhaps for the first time, introduced motor cars and palatial buildings for the residence of saintly persons just to attract the general public in big cities. The main fact is that one has to associate with a saintly person. In this age, people are not going to search out a saint in the forests. So the saints and sages have to come to the big cities to make arrangements to receive the people in general, who are accustomed to the modern amenities of material life. Gradually, such persons will learn that palatial buildings or comfortable apartments are not at all necessary. The real necessity is to become free from material bondage in whatever way possible. According to the orders of Srila Rupa Goswami, Anasakta Vishayan Yatarham Upayunjata Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Vairagyam Uchate. This is actually the last shloka that we're scheduled to learn in our group, I think, or one of the last ones. Definition of what is Yukta Vairagya, appropriate renunciation. When one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. That is called Uchate. That is called Yukta Vairagyam. Appropriate renunciation. That's from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-255. One should not be attached to material opulence, but material opulence may be accepted in the Krishna consciousness movement to facilitate the propagation of the movement. In other words, material opulence may be accepted as yukta vairagya, that is, for renunciation. Rajovacha Shrutam Amvikshitam Brahman Bhagavan Yad Abhashata Naita Janantupadhyaya Kemna Bruyur Viduryadi. The king replied, "My dear Brahman, whatever you have said, I have heard with great intention, and, considering all of it, I have come to the conclusion that the acharyas, teachers, who engaged me in fruitive activity did not know this confidential knowledge. If they were aware of it, why did they not explain it to me?" I have come to the conclusion that the acharyas who engaged me in fruitive activity did not know this confidential knowledge. If they were aware of it, why did they not explain it to me? Sorry, I spaced out while I was reading. Purport. Actually, the so-called teachers or leaders of material society do not really know the goal of life. They are described in Bhagavad Gita as Mayaya Pahrita Jnana. They appear to be very learned scholars, but actually the influence of the illusory energy has taken away their knowledge. Real knowledge means searching out Krishna. Vedaishcha sarvar aham eva vedya. All Vedic knowledge is meant for searching out Krishna. Rup Manjari just sent me this book that her mother translated by Srila Goswami Maharaj. Premamoy Anveshan, the loving search for Krishna. All Vedic knowledge is meant for searching out Krishna, because Krishna is the origin of everything. Janma dasya yataha. In Bhagavad Gita 10.2, Krishna says, Aham adir hi devanam. Wait, is it Premamoy Anveshan? I think so. Anyways, Krishna says, Aham adir hi devanam. I am the source of the demigods. Thus, Krishna is the origin and beginning of all demigods, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and all others. The Vedic ritualistic ceremonies are concerned with satisfying different demigods, but unless one is very advanced, he cannot understand that the original personality is Sri Krishna. Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Why are there two? Anyhow. After hearing the instructions of Nārada, King Bahishman came to his senses. The real goal of life is to attain devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The king therefore decided to reject the so-called priestly orders that simply engage their followers in the ritualistic ceremonies without giving effective instructions about the goal of life. At the present moment, the churches, temples, and mosques all over the world are not attracting people because foolish priests cannot elevate their followers to the platform of knowledge. Not being aware of the real goal of life, they simply keep their congregations in ignorance. Consequently, those who are well educated have become uninterested in the ritualistic ceremonies. At the same time, they are not benefited with real knowledge. This Krishna consciousness movement is therefore very important for the enlightenment of all classes. Following in the footsteps of Maharaj Parishman, everyone should take advantage of this Krishna consciousness movement and abandon the stereotyped ritualistic ceremonies that go under the garb of so many religions. The Goswamis from the very beginning differed from the priestly class that was engaged in ritualistic ceremonies. Indeed, Srila Sanatana Goswami compiled his Hari Bhakti Vilas for the guidance of the Vaishnavas. The Vaishnavas, not caring for the lifeless activities of the priestly class, take to full Krishna consciousness and become perfect in this very life. That is described in the previous verse as Paramahamsa Sharanam, taking shelter of the Paramahamsa, the liberated soul, and becoming successful in this life. Sangshayotra tu me vipra sanchinas tatkrito mahan rishayopi himurhyanti yatra nendriya vrittaya. My dear Brahman, there are contradictions between your instructions and those of my spiritual teachers who engaged me in fruitive activities. I now understand the distinction between devotional service, knowledge, and renunciation. I had some doubts about them, but you have now very kindly dissipated all these doubts. I can now understand how even the great sages are bewildered by the real purpose of life. Of course, there is no question of sense gratification. Purport. King Barhishman was engaged in different types of sacrifice for elevation to the heavenly planets. People generally are attracted by these activities, and very rarely is a person attracted to devotional service, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirms. Unless one is very, very fortunate, he does not take to devotional service. Even the so-called learned Vedic scholars are bewildered by devotional service. They are generally attracted to the rituals for sense gratification. In devotional service, there is no sense gratification, but only transcendental loving service to the Lord. Consequently, the so-called priests engaged in sense gratification do not very much like devotional service. The Brahmins, the priests, have been against this Krishna consciousness movement since it began with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started this movement, the priestly class lodged complaints to the Qazi, the magistrate of the Mohammedan government. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had to lead a civil disobedience movement against the propaganda of the so-called followers of Vedic principles. These people are described as the karma jata smartas, which indicates that they are priests engaged in ritualistic ceremonies. It is here stated that such people become bewildered. Rishayopi himuhyanti. To save oneself from the hands of these karma jata smartas, one should strictly follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sarva dharmam parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tam sarva papebhyo mokshaishami ma suchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. Bhagavad Gita 1866. Karman arabhate yena puman iha vihayatam amutranyena dehena jushtani sa yadashnute. The results of whatever a living entity does in this life are enjoyed in the next life. Purport. A person generally does not know how one body is linked with another body. How is it possible that one suffers or enjoys the results of activities in this body and yet another body in the next life? This is a question the king wants Nārada Muni to answer. How may one have a human body in this next life and not have a human? How may one have a human body in this life and not to have a human body in the next. Even great philosophers and scientists cannot account for the transferal of karma from one body to another. As we experience, every individual soul has an individual body, and one person's activities or body's activities are not enjoyed or suffered by another body or another person. The question is how the activities of one body are suffered or enjoyed in the next. Iti veda vidang vada shruyate tatra tatraha karma yat kriyate proktam paroksham na prakashate. This is the last verse that we're reading for today. The expert knowers of the Vedic conclusions say that one enjoys or suffers the results of his past activities. But practically, it is seen that the body that performed the work in the last birth is already lost. So how is it possible to enjoy or suffer the reactions of that work in a different body? Purport. Atheists want evidence for the resultant actions of past activities. Therefore they ask, where is the proof that I am suffering and enjoying the resultant actions of past karma? They have no idea how the subtle body carries the results of the present body's actions down to the next gross body. The present body may be finished grossly, but the subtle body is not finished. It carries the soul to the next body. Actually, the gross body is dependent on the subtle body. Therefore, the next gross body must suffer and enjoy according to the subtle body. The soul is carried by the subtle body continuously until liberated from gross material bondage. So we'll hear Nārada's answer to this question tomorrow. Nārada explains the mind's role in the soul's transmigration. This 9th chapter is a very long chapter, huh? Or I think we have 2 more days and then we're finished. Like this. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just seeing let's say Shri Mataji's. Where are the words? Was it frozen? Like, could you not see what I was reading? Anyhow, sorry about that, if that was the case. Okay, and so on that cover of the Footprints of Krishna. Okay, so that book is a different book. Premamaya Anveshan is Srila Sridhar Goswami Maharaj's book about Krishna's loving search for the devotees. Okay, how Krishna is trying to get us. And then there's another book, Search for Sri Krishna. Okay. Jai Shishi Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shishi Radha Vinod Vihari Juki Jai. Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Juki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Srila Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatarashatashmar Srila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatarashatashmar Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatarashatashmar Srila Bhakti Vigyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Ashatarashatashmar Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Mahabhagavat Srila Gokshara Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Patadash Raghunath Shar Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय. श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल ब्रज मंडल मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जाय. सर्व अभिष्ट प्रदात गिरिराज महाराज की जाय. श्री राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड की जाय. श्री मुनि देवी गंगा देवी की जाय. श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जाय. श्री भक्ति देवी की जाय. श्री पूर्णमासी योग माया की जाय. श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जाय. श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन की जाय. अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जाय. समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जाय. श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि वो वृंदाय तुलसीदेवाय प्रियाय केशवाय कृष्ण भक्ति प्रददेवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः. पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. Dandavat pranams. This is how much we have left. Yes. And then we're finished with the 4th canto. Then we'll begin the 5th canto. Okay, Harivo. Dandavat pranams Indira Mataji, Rup Manjari Didi, Raseshwari Mataji, Madhavi Didi, Prajumna Prabhu, Mantramurti Mataji, everybody. Dandavat pranams. Gargaraji, Harivo.